Hello, my dear friends. Operator Starsky here. Welcome to my stream. It is so cool to see you guys. I'm really sorry, my European friends and family. Sorry for such a late stream because the only reason this stream takes place at 1 a.m. German time is literally my own natural stupidity. 6 p.m. I wanted to cook dinner and prepare the stream and talk to you guys and go to bed. But I relaxed a bit in the chair watching some YouTube video. I opened my eyes, it was 10 p.m. I woke up in the state of complete panic. But anyways, today we will discuss the summit that took place in Paris involving the coalition of willing, and we will talk about this just a bit because there were a lot of extremely interesting and extremely important statements made. And I would like to talk about them. First of all, President Macron announced that the deterrence forces from multiple countries, they will operate in Ukraine as soon as the ceasefire is established. Those forces will be deployed in Ukraine, and Russia will have absolutely no say in this. Finally, we can hear strong statements coming from countries like France, which is a superpower with nuclear weapons. This is extremely important. I really see that France and President Macron become literally a good example for the rest of the European countries. And there are several key points made during this summit today. So the countries in the coalition have agreed to maintain and increase pressure on the Russian aggressor, and this also involved conducting pressure on the Shadow Fleet. 70% of all the oil that was smuggled by Russians in 2025 were smuggled due to the Shadow Fleet, 300 different tankers and other vessels utilized by Russian terrorists. It's extremely important if we find a way to stop Russian Shadow Fleet. It will accelerate the inevitable collapse of the Russian terrorist federation. This is important to remember. Another thing that was discussed was that in 3 weeks, partner countries will present their proposals for monitoring of the compliance with the ceasefire in Ukraine, because again, as we talked in our previous stream, the US did not ensure the ceasefire. They did not develop any sort of responsibility for violation of the ceasefire. It's literally, if you violate the ceasefire, we are violating it back. That's doesn't sound really professionally, okay, from coming from the representatives of the US, unfortunately. And a French-British military group will be also deployed to Ukraine. That is another key point that was discussed. This group will be deployed to Ukraine to develop a future training framework for the Ukrainian army. Something that, again, we don't see happening often. Usually it's Ukrainian army going to like United States or United States, United Kingdom, Germany, and acquire their experience there. So another good decision. And starting next week, the diplomatic advisors will oversee the implementation of those decisions that were taken today. President Zelensky also said that British, French, and German delegations will arrive to Kyiv to discuss the possibility of establishing the ceasefire. They will come up or develop the possible plan for the ceasefire and also deployment of the peacekeeping troops in Ukraine. And what is most important, my friends, is that all summit participants unanimously agreed that now is not the time to lift the sanctions against Russia. Extremely important decision, and we will talk a bit more about this. So I would like to attract your attention to one very interesting fact. In Saudi Arabia, United States and the Russian terrorists made an agreement. We talked about it in the previous episode. They made an agreement that stated that the ceasefire will only be possible on a condition, that the US will assist on lifting sanctions and supporting the Russian agricultural exports. So one thing that attracted my attention back then, but I forgot why, now I remember. Sorry. Why not sleeping, my friend? Because enemy never sleeps. Okay, so we should forget about sleeping as well. That's the only reason. Reason number two is because I'm stupid and I slept through everything. So returning to our little discussion, right? Fun fact is that even though some tariffs on Russian exports were implemented, they were placed around Europe, but the fact is Russian agriculture and Russian fertilizers, because Russians were mentioning this, they were not sanctioned, actually. What is sanctioned? You can check it out yourself. There is a whole big website involved with the EU that explains in details what exactly is sanctioned. Sanctioned were technologies, different electronic parts used by Russians in creating weapons, and financial institutions, and basically a lot of people that were responsible for the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Those were sanctioned. Food, agriculture, fertilizers were not. And the products like fertilizers, for example, products like oil and gas, there are different tariffs, but they were not banned completely because many countries still depend on the international trade with Russia. And for example, Europe, as of this moment, consumes 1/4 of Russian fertilizer, which brings Russia around 5 billion euros since 2022. Okay, those are not really big money because currently Russia makes transactions worth approximately 10 billion euro on a monthly basis. So the fact is, Russia kind of pretends that its agricultural products and fertilizers are sanctioned. So what they state is they state that Russia lost many contracts, like a bunch of contracts were basically rejected by the European countries because Russia is a sanctioned state. The real reason they need to lift the sanctions is not really related to the necessity of selling the Russian fertilizers, my friends. Like, it's really fun how they play this. So fact is, Russia keeps trading. The beneficiary accounts are not blocked in Europe. They are being serviced and everything works. Russia still keeps selling their goods, whatever goods they have. They keep selling their fertilizers to the Europe, as I already mentioned, so everything works. But they pretend as if they're being sanctioned, as if everybody hates them and things like that. The main reason Russia wants to lift the sanctions is to unblock the bank accounts of the Russian oligarchs and companies to be able to freely perform financial operations. The goal is to be able to improve financing of Russia's war efforts. And that is the only reason the Russia pushes the United States to lift the sanctions, to unblock financial institutions and Rossельхозbank. The fact is that Russia pushes the US to unblock not only the Rossельхозbank, that is important to remember, but also other financial institutions. And in other words, Kremlin demands a broad lifting of sanctions for its companies and its oligarchs. At the same time, there are numerous investigations performed by Ukrainian intelligence, performed by journalist communities from around the world, including Reuters, that confirmed that Russia uses its financial accounts that service and facilitate Russian agricultural sector to finance the Russian war machine. Some of the cases, by the way, included transporting weapons and stolen Ukrainian grain. Stolen Ukrainian grain, guys, the grain that was grown by Ukrainians, collected by Ukrainians, stockpiled by Ukrainians, and then literally snatched by Russian terrorists who occupied the territory and took Ukrainian grain, like they do usually. So what does the reconnecting Russian banks to SWIFT and lifting sanctions from financial institutions, what does it mean in terms of numbers? You will be impressed. It means that Russians can potentially re-establish their access to transactions as big as $100 billion a month. That is comparing to current $10 billion a month that they have at this very point. The bottom line is that Russia basically manipulates the topic of the global food security and things like that to create the foundation for lifting sanctions. To reestablish themselves, the terrorist Russian Federation, as a negotiating party rather than the terrorist state, and basically ramp up its war industry. So if you want to prolong the war, you can lift sanctions. If you want to see Ukraine destroyed, if you want to see Russia becoming stronger, ramping up its war machine, then basically that's exactly what you can do. You can lift sanctions, you can help them sell their production around the world and things like that. Remove price caps on oil and gas and see the world burning literally before the end of the decade. The bad news is exactly that. The bad news is that the US representing, US negotiating team is actually full of clueless and absolutely brain-dead individuals who already agreed to help Russia reanimate its economy. What is the myth? Okay, the myth is that Russia is this huge superpower, unbeatable, indestructible war machine, sending its donkeys raised using nanotechnologies and horses, you know, bionic creatures to the front lines. They send ships to space, they send genetically modified creatures to the front line. They're so advanced. And the myth is that you cannot destroy Russia's economy because it's so big and so powerful, and everybody should respect Russia because it's so good. At the same time, Russian GDP, correct me if I'm wrong, but Russian GDP, and Russia is the biggest country in the world, and it's 20 times smaller than the combined GDP of the European countries, of the European Union. And it's 40 times smaller than the combined GDP of the NATO countries. As General Hodges in this interview today said, basically the welfare, the wealth of European countries dwarfs Russia, literally. Don't even compare Russia to Italy anymore, because there's no point in that. So this is the myth, and unfortunately, people in the U.S. negotiating team believe in this myth, and not only they believe it, but they also help to spread it around the world for the reasons unknown. All right. So this is the bad news. The bad news is that the negotiating team from the US completely complies and agrees with the Russian terrorists. Everything's okay. They have full understanding, which, when American negotiating team and especially American president says that he has a full understanding with Putin, this is something that literally sent chills down my spine. Because if you have full understanding with Putin, apparently something is wrong with the world, all right? Because Putin is de facto the bad guy. But there's good news. The good news is that SWIFT is generally European system. So only the European Union has access, has this ability to restore SWIFT for the blocked, for the sanctioned financial institutions. And we already know that European Union already rejected Russia's demands. So they said that the only possible condition for lifting this sanction is Russia's complete withdrawal from Ukraine, which I think deserves our thumbs up right now. On the other hand, unfortunately, the US can pressure the European countries. And it is possible that Russia will use its influence on the White House in order to pressure European countries, so they would lift those restrictions and sanctions. For instance, recently Trump administration raised tariffs on imported European cars, the cars imported to the United States. Of course, they can absolutely easily cancel those tariffs if European countries lift sanctions from Russia. And the question emerges naturally, right? Is it even possible? Do you even see this happening? So here's a fresh case. 2 weeks ago, in the European Union, there were these discussions on continuing sanctions against Russia. Some of you probably remember this. And one country, specifically Hungary, not country, let's be honest, Orban, right, was blocking this decision. And he only agreed to unblock this decision to continue sanctioning Russia for one condition. And the condition was lifting sanctions from 3 people. And those 3 specific people were Russian oligarchs and related, connected Russian individuals. Not like they were members of Orban's family, not like they were his best friends. I noticed this moment 2 weeks ago, but we didn't talk about it because there were other updates. But this is something that I memorized, right? So this is the case when Russia openly uses its agents of influence in Europe to push its demands, and literally those 3 Russian oligarchs and individuals related to Russian oligarchs, they had sanctions lifted on them because Orban was told by Putin apparently to do that, to use his influence in the European Union to lift the sanctions from those guys. So this is the fresh case, and it raises another question: can United States, can Trump administration do the same if Putin asks Trump to lift some specific sanctions on some specific Russian oligarchs to restore this funding of the Russian war machine? Can it happen? How do you think? I think that so far, like, of course, we understand that United States is not part of European Union, but we also understand that European Union and United States rely on each other, right? They depend on each other big time. So there is a slight possibility, and unfortunately, I see it happening. So we know that after this case with Orban, we know that Russia will definitely rely on Orban to veto or block crucial decisions and create problems for Europe or create some benefits for Russia, because we already seen him doing so. So this is my observation from today's summit and the recent negotiations between the United States and Russian terrorists. Again, so interesting to observe Russia using such global and such important topics as, food, agricultural production, things like they want to position themselves as, a country that wants peace so much. They only want to be able to trade with hungry nations. They want to trade fertilizers with Europeans because they're so friendly and open people, So please lift the sanctions from like our financial institutions so we could facilitate this trade, so we could feed everybody, So we have several other updates, also very important, regarding what we have just discussed. Please let me know, all right? Because I really, really need to know your opinion on this as well. And we also have information coming from the Ukrainian intelligence. 20th of March, there was a party in Engels, right, involving UFOs, Ukrainian flying objects. So according to the reports of the Ukrainian intelligence, on this day, Russians lost 96 cruise missiles stockpiled at the air base in Engels. Engels. This is the Russian military air base that is constantly utilized to commit strikes against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. This is the base for the Russian strategic aviation Tu-95 bombers, Tu-22, and this is the place where they take off and land. And recently they had to relocate a bunch of their airplanes from this base, shortly before this strike, actually, as far as I remember, and Russians lost almost 100 cruise missiles that otherwise would be launched from their strategic bombers at Ukrainian cities. I believe 2 or 3 attacks involving those cruise missiles stockpiled there were planned already. So it's a really, really good good update for all of us. Another one is Another one is another update coming from the Ukrainian intelligence, because according to the Ukrainian intelligence, Russia ramps up the production of its missiles at this very moment. It's not related to this specific strike, it's related to the peace negotiations. So basically, while the Russian terrorists are talking about peace with Witkov and other individuals, at the same time, they receive orders to ramp up the production of their ballistic and cruise missiles. That is interesting observation. Also, according to the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Office, Mr. Zhovkva, in Riyadh, during the negotiations between Russian terrorists and the US, Russian terrorists refused to discuss halting of the strikes on the civilian objects that include like kindergartens, children hospitals, apartment buildings, and everything else. So basically, they were talking about halting strikes on the energy infrastructure, including refineries, of course, Russian refineries. But at the same time, when the question arose, to stop striking the civilian objects like apartment buildings, like those that were hit in Sumy, in Kharkiv recently, the Russian terrorists refused. Question is, why did they do that? Why do the Russian terrorists want to keep having this ability, this granted ability, to strike civilian objects in Ukraine? And I believe that it was extremely effectively explained by Ryan Macbeth in some of his videos, where he talks about creating dilemmas for your enemy. And basically what it means is that Ukraine is a vast territory, okay? Ukraine is a really big country. It's second largest country in Europe. And we have a lot of industries, we have a lot of enterprises, we have a lot of targets that are very important for the Russian terrorists to strike. And the reason they strike civilian objects is to stretch Ukrainian air defense. They know that if they launch 10 missiles at Ukrainian industry and 10 missiles at Ukrainian civilian targets, including hospitals and kindergartens, this will force Ukrainian defenders to stretch their air defense. When we are confident that Russians are not striking civilian targets in Ukraine, when we know that they don't do that, it means that we can literally concentrate all of our air defense over the specific strategic targets, and Russians will have absolutely no chance to strike them. But when Russians launch their missiles at all targets, including civilian targets, and that is a very, very simple explanation. So you could understand why Russians are hitting hospitals and kindergartens and schools and everything else, and apartment buildings. They do this on purpose. So we have to stretch our air defense. We have to take a Patriot system that covers some crucial industry, and we have to relocate it to be able to protect the skies over the apartment buildings and schools and kindergartens. So this is the main reason why Russians attack civilian targets in Ukraine, and I hope that it explains a lot. So, what else do we cover today? I hope that you had a chance to see the interview with General Ben Hodges today. I published it. Not I. The team published it on the UATV already, and it's available. The link is in the description. And Did they confirm the destruction of 4 helicopters? The video that was published by the Ukrainian main intelligence directorate confirmed, yes. But I don't remember if Russian Z generals were talking about it. I didn't monitor this specific case. So, interview with General Ben Hodges, highly recommended to see, guys. In the description, you can find the link to this interview. I would really appreciate if you check it out because it's worth it. I expected this interview to happen literally since 2024. It's a big luck that it happened actually, and I was not like like nervous. I was terrified actually interviewing a general because where I come from, you usually don't ask questions to generals. Usually it's the other way around. They ask a lot of uneasy questions to you. So it was an extremely interesting experience. I hope you will find this interview interesting. I did because, as always, a lot of insights, a lot of facts coming from like the other level, okay, the other level of strategic analysis than like my level, or right. So please check it out. And let me check out if you guys have some questions, because I believe that you do. What did you have for dinner? Literally, I made noodles and fish sticks, and we're already discussing food, right? Fish sticks and noodles and boiled eggs, and literally I ate whatever I could find. I had a piece of like tart, like cake with almonds, and it was so good. Is Germany and France giving Ukraine nukes? I wish. I wished. The fact is, actually, France is ready to use its nukes as a nuclear umbrella for Europe. I think it's a great decision. So, Terry Vivchar, my good friend, it's so good to see you here as well. I think it's a great decision. Again, one interesting idea, and it's an obvious fact actually, but we don't really think about. General Ben Hodges said in his interview that, of course, Russia produced like enormous amounts of nuclear weapons, but at the same time, knowing that its adversary can respond, it's not necessarily it's not necessary to have like the same amount of nuclear weapons. You simply need to make it clear that you will respond to any nuclear threat accordingly. It doesn't matter if you strike Russia with 10 nuclear weapons, with 10 nuclear missiles, or 100 nuclear missiles. The damage will be done, and this is something that Putin doesn't want. Why he doesn't want it? Because Putin wants to have rich life, quiet, rich life, um, in his several castles. Okay, he wants welfare, he wants wealth. His oligarchs want wealth. They don't want to hide in bunkers. They want to be able to travel to beautiful, exotic countries. They want to be able to spend their money, as well as Putin, by the way. They want good life. They want, like they want life like Russians do. They don't dream about Russia becoming a nuclear wasteland, even if it's like just part of Russia, even if it's like, just Moscow, for example, or just St. Petersburg, or both. No, they want those cities that will be targeted on the first place in case of the nuclear war. They want those cities be preserved. They want to be able to go to restaurants. They want to be able to receive pleasure from living. That's the term I was looking for. They don't dream of Russia turning into a nuclear wasteland, and nobody does, actually. French people don't dream about France turning into nuclear wasteland. Nobody think like that about their country, right? So it's an obvious thing. Another reason why Russians don't want to strike European countries with nuclear weapons, and I'm talking about Russian oligarchs and Russian elites, I think you know the answer, right? It's because Russian oligarchs and Russian elites don't want to kill their own children studying and living in European countries. So that is another big reason why we will never see that happening. So the answer is you don't necessarily need to have like 5,000 nuclear warheads if Russia has 5,000 nuclear warheads. You can only have like 100, 10, 15, 50, right? You need to have enough to strike several key cities, and knowing that Russians will have a response no matter what, will stop them from doing shit. How about the latest extortion resource deal proposed by, my God, the guy? Actually, it's crazy. I've seen the news that they made another edition of this deal, and that they keep changing it. And the main question is why? Why do they do that? Why do they keep doing that? What is the point? So the deal itself, I don't really see it being signed, and I don't really see a different president, all right, doing the way Trump does, like treating Ukraine like shit, treating other partners like shit, treating Canada like shit, treating European countries like shit. I don't have words recently. My channel is not generally about criticizing, American presidents and things like that, but sometimes I just cannot keep it inside because I cannot stand disrespect so much. I don't know. It's like, when we judge somebody or when we analyze somebody, we always analyze them from our standpoint. I cannot see myself, for example, disrespecting anybody in this world besides Russians. Fuck Russians. But I cannot see myself disrespecting anybody else like they do. And that is insane. And it raises question, why the hell then they should be respected? Oh, it's a hard topic, okay? Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Oh my god, I wanna rewatch this movie actually. The other day I was listening to the soundtrack in my car, and I really, really want to rewatch this one. Stephen King once said, like, why do we like, why do we enjoy horror stories? Considering that our life is full of all kinds of threats like nuclear threats, ISIS, and things like that. Why do we even enjoy horror stories? And that is literally the reason why, because we need to have place to escape, right? To run away to, and Ghostbusters is a good solution if you want to vent. All right. What kind of douchebag bombs a children's hospital? Where we know the answer. We know the answer, my friend. Why have a ceasefire when there are business deals to be made, money to extort, and corruption to milk? Yeah, absolutely. But the main thing is that ceasefire is not part of Putin's plan. Ceasefire is not part of his strategy. Putin's strategy doesn't involve a ceasefire with Ukraine unless Ukraine is defeated, unless we capitulate and we raise our hands and are ready to give up our sovereignty. This is the only peace that he recognizes. Ceasefires to show his good intentions, no, it never worked. It never worked since 2014. Has European military support improved over the past few months? In particular, are more artillery shells being delivered to Ukraine? So we, my brigade specifically, we received a big supply of those shells, right? But the problem is, unfortunately, we can see those shells stop coming from the United States. That is a possibility that they will stop coming from the United States to Ukraine. And that is a problem. So we need to find some kind of solution, which can be either Europe helping Ukraine ramping up the production of the shells and helping Ukraine with supplies. Or maybe there will be a possibility to, for example, supplant the shells with drones, which, like, you cannot really supplant the 155 millimeter shells with drones, even though they do similar, stuff, that they have similar purpose. But there are cases when you literally cannot do that. And so, unfortunately, there is a chance that there will be a gap, not complete loss of this supply, but a gap. I got a mail or message from, I think, Ukraine 24. Can I trust it? Nowadays, you can barely trust any messages whatsoever. The other day, for example, I received an email from YouTube, creators, where a dude, obviously created with AI, and the video was unlisted and having only like 90 views, was convincing me, and he was like a bit nervous, as if he was like on drugs or something, and he was like, dude, you need to sign this letter and send it to YouTube Studio, and you have only 1 week, otherwise like your whole monetization will be removed, you will grow plenty of cellulite on your ass, your head will turn into a pumpkin, and other things. And of course, you need to download the file from the link here in the description. It was a good try. It was a good try. I think Greg Terry also received something like that. It was a good try, though. Yeah, I admit. So, guys, if somebody asks you to, like, immediately download this file and send it over here, because otherwise, like, a lot of people will face consequences. Just ignore that, guys. That can be a scam, and what's even more threatening is that you can just download plenty of viruses and let whatever hackers coming from like North Korea or Russia steal plenty of your data. So please be cautious, okay? Always report such cases. By the way, this is important to remember. Don't just ignore, but always report such cases. Putin has violated 190 agreements. Yeah, there was an investigation, I believe, like yesterday or today, about this. So just so people could understand the scale of the bullshit we had to deal with since 2014. Have you thought about starting a fundraiser for heavy drones? They're becoming more and more important. I thought about starting a fundraiser with my guys from my brigade for FPVs, because I am not serving there anymore, all right? I don't really understand the needs they have at this moment. They do have this understanding, and this is something they communicate to me. So I know that in case we will face those shortages of 155 millimeter shells, we will most probably have to supplant them with drones, for example, and it will be extremely crucial because there are 10 attacks a day, for example, at the span of the front line where my guys are deployed. 10 attacks, 15 attacks, 5 attacks, 20 attacks a day, and they have to deflect them. Every single attack means that they need to use 10, 15, 20 drones in order to destroy their targets. So you can just multiply, right? And understand the numbers. So I think another fundraiser that we will see happening very soon will be dedicated to the drones for my brigade. And I think I will also involve some officers from my brigade who luckily speak very, very good English. If the information on signal gate is not classified, can we have all the upcoming operations details so I can watch it in real time? Actually, yeah, actually, this is something that I wanted to know myself because, like, I was searching for some kind of group where I can receive the real time information, for example, directly from Mr. Hexet, but I don't know where to find such signal group. Maybe you guys can tell me, maybe you can advise me something like that. But on the other hand, I know that currently you can find in the open sources, you can find all kinds of like email addresses and phone numbers of people like Mr. Hexet or what was the name of their intelligence chief. You know who I'm talking about. So it takes a bit of Googling to find all that because this current team is just so good. Do you know if the manpower shortage in Ukraine is improving? I know that this shortage, though it exists, but it's not as critical as Russia portrays it to be. because, as you can see, Ukrainian armed forces conduct counteroffensive. Um, if you're following, for example, the recent updates, there were several successful counteroffensive in the area of Toretsk, in Pokrovsk as well. So Belgorod, of course. So this shortage, though it exists, but it's not as overwhelming and critical as Russia portrays it in the Russian media and retransmitting it later to the American media as well. So it's not really the case. The biggest problem is that there are people who keep fighting for like 3 years already. And it's kind of like it requires a lot of motivation, I would say, because I was asking myself, can I like withstand this every year? You know, every year I would face, I would ask myself this question: can I see myself a military like next year? Right? And I was asking this question to myself for 10 years since late 2014. So this requires a lot of dedication and a lot of motivation. But the good thing is that luckily the Ukrainian servicemen have things like vacations, day offs. They do have that. And this is important. Is it true 6 Russians? I heard something like that. I heard something like that today. But again, you know, today was a crazy day because I couldn't finish all I wanted to finish. I literally slept through everything. I forgot to announce several things on in my community posts and in other media. I was sitting in the chair watching YouTube. And you know, when you feel comfy, when you feel relaxed, when you feel good and satisfied, you know, sometimes you just relax, and especially if you find some very convenient position, right? Sometimes you can just like sit like a chicken, you know, turn off. That's exactly what happened to me because I was watching a video and I remember I literally I just started it and I closed my eyes, I blinked, and I opened my eyes and it's like 10 p.m. Such things didn't happen for a while already, so it was nasty. Unfortunately, I hate when it happens because then for the rest of the day, I blame myself for not finishing things. Why does Ukraine conscript their men that are older than many countries? According to Ukrainian law, we can conscript until you are 27 or 25. When I served, you could be conscripted until you are 27, but I think that they lowered the age recently, and now they conscript until you're 25. So this is what happens in the Ukrainian army. Let me check. Let me check one thing though. I think you will like it. Just give me 1 minute, please. Where did I have it? Here. Here is this absolutely amazing video if we're talking about the age of conscripts, right? I would really like you to see this one because I find it Absolutely amazing. So this is a Russian soldier, like you can see nowadays on the front lines.
Хочу передать всем привет.
Why do we have no picture? Just a second, please. Why do we have no picture? Oh my god, come on. I know that you can. Alright, let's save this one. I've been watching it today, you know, literally I had enormous pleasure.
Хочу передать.
Yeah, unfortunately I cannot show this one, but what if I convert this while have stream right now? Is it even possible? The file contains some media that isn't compatible with your player. Okay, my friend, sorry. Another time. All right, I didn't prepare well enough. But I can make screenshots, right? So I will just show you a screenshot because I can. Look at this young face. So this is a Russian soldier sending his greetings, his best wishes to everybody he knows. That's a good example of like the quality of soldiers, right? I hope it also answers your question, at least partially. Oh my god. Russian Rambo, generally speaking. Why so many outsiders interested in the age of Ukrainian conscripts? Who knows? Maybe there is some kind of reason we don't know. Baby orc, like orc larva, I think. Yeah. And this is very interesting, by the way. Why are so many outsiders interested in the age of Ukrainian conscripts? That's a mystery to me, my friend. I have no idea. I think there are people that are like, you know, fanatical researchers of like the age of Ukrainian conscripts. Maybe it's their hobby. Like, you know, this guy must be like 28 and 3 months, and that guy must be like 45, 6 months and 3 days. You know, people have different hobbies. Why they never listen to Ukraine? There are so many questions regarding them, which start with why. That's insane. Can you add the link? It's in the Telegram. Let me see if I can share it. Let me see, my friend. Generally, I can. I'm lost in the windows right now. There's too many of them on the screen. Another time, okay? I will do that in my next video, I promise. Was that interview with General Hodges your first conversation with any general at all? No, no, no. I had several conversations with generals, but generally, when I served, I didn't see them often, all right? So I would mostly communicate with everybody else, like from private to colonel, but the generals, because generals, they are few and they're always busy. And mostly they are the people who ask you questions, all kinds of questions. Conscript age was one of the misinformation tool being used by the Kremlin. Yeah, so why help Ukraine when they won't conscript all their young men at the same time? At the same time, Russians on a different channels, right, via the different media, they were saying that Ukraine was conscripting like 14-year-olds, and they would show you like proofs or like Ukrainian women crying because they're being sent to Avdiivka and things like that, wearing full makeup, but also uniform. They are so creative, you know, like they would make believable content. They would really make believable content, but because Russian propagandists are overly creative, you can see a lot of things that just don't combine, right? Like women going to trenches with like long nails and full makeup and things like that. Yeah. I saw the Russian put a pipe attraction in Cheburashka. Did you pipe attract what? Pipe attraction in Cheburashka? Oh my god, my fantasy right now at 2 a.m. is drawing all kinds of crazy things. So if you have a link, my dear friend, please let me know. I will see it tomorrow when I wake up, when I'm less vulnerable to, you know, like psychological damage. I think it's brilliant that Ukraine doesn't require under 25 years to sign up. They can still join armed forces if they choose to. Is that right? Yes, absolutely right. And another thing that we should remember, my friends, is that why we were not conscripting young people like to the battle brigades, to the combat service. Why they were not conscripted? The reason we started hearing more about conscripting like 18-year-olds to the army, the very topic emerged after like first half of 2003 to 2004. So it's like late 2003, early 2004, and that is exactly when Ukraine started losing a lot of men in places like Bakhmut, for example, because we had a 6 months long gap in artillery shells. So that is, if you probably remember, that is the period when in the United States they could not pass the decision. They could not approve the decision to send the military aid to Ukraine. Again, Trump was among those who would oppose it as much as possible. And this is when crucial artillery shells were not delivered to Ukraine. And that is when we lost a lot of highly motivated guys that were fighting brave since first days. And literally, when you shake a hand of somebody who voted against that aid to Ukraine, after that, please go to the bathroom and wash your hands from the blood, because those guys who didn't pass that aid to Ukraine, they have their arms covered in blood until here. That's a Ukrainian blood. And those very people, after that, started asking questions. Well, why don't you mobilize younger people then? Even though it's them to blame for losing those Ukrainian soldiers, for this problem to even emerge, right? It's them to blame for that. Let's be honest. Did you see the drone images of the Russian in a wheelchair? Oh my god, I saw the dude on the crutches. I saw the dude on the crutches. He was like throwing a crutch at a drone, but the dude on the wheelchair, I don't know. What I have seen though, and I will show you this, is, for example, this one. Actually, I have two interesting updates. Okay, so first one is this. Where did I save it? I'm sorry, my friends. It's so hard to operate all this at 2 a.m. Here. So we have Russian star of the Paralympics, right? Alexander Rabatnitsky, the master of sports in Russia, silver champion of the Paralympic Games in Tokyo. So Alexander volunteered to fight in Ukraine to kill Ukrainian people, and like logically this led to his demise, right? So this dude became good in Ukraine, even though he was a Paralympic champion. So basically, he had uh, mental disabilities, right? That would not let him serve in the army. However, because Russia literally doesn't care, they recruited this man, even with mental disabilities, and they accepted him. Again, guys, this is the person with disabilities, and with disabilities that literally can allow anybody, like, I don't know, trick him, fool him, things like that. But apparently they convinced him that, listen, it's a good idea if you go to Ukraine. You don't have to work hard. You can literally, I don't know, sit behind a desk or like guard a house, right? Or like a checkpoint. Nothing bad will happen. So he became good. He became good in Ukraine. And there is another story. I will share it with you right now. How exactly he officially got recruited in the Russian terrorist group known as Russian Army. I have absolutely no idea. Like, officially, you cannot recruit people with disabilities. It's against the law, but we are talking about Russia, of course, where law doesn't work. And here we have another one, right? We have this person. So this is Alexei Vakhrushev from Perm, Russian Federation. He's 22 and he also has mental disability. He has a mentality of like a 9-year-old child. And Russians also recruited this individual, and he is lucky, right? He is alive and lucky, but he could get eliminated easily. I see, a lot of commentaries coming from different people. Like, have you seen those atrocious Ukrainian drone operators? Russian soldier was literally crying for help, or he had no legs and he couldn't run away. And they mercilessly killed this man on the ground. Don't come to Ukraine with like Kalashnikov and everything will be fine. If you don't travel to another country with a weapon, there's 99% 9 chance that you will survive. I tried, I'm alive. I never went to a different country with like AK. I am alive. I know a lot of people who never came to another country with weapons. They also feel fine. So, of course, you're not protected against, being, I don't know, hit by a low-flying pigeon on a street. But generally speaking, if you don't wear uniform, don't sign contract, don't take a rifle, and don't travel to Ukraine, surprisingly, there is a big possibility that you will survive you will live a long, happy life, at least until you're like, I don't know, like 42. Life full of joy. Maybe you will have kids, who knows, maybe grandkids. Try sometimes, dear people from the Terrorist Federation. Try this. It will change your life. Merciless Ukrainian drone operators killed our poor Russian invader. How could they? Don't come to Ukraine. If you're not invited, we're not happy to see you here. What does support for Ukrainian veterans look like after the war to you? Does it feel sustainable to have support for these men and women? We have a lot of different programs for supporting Ukrainian veterans, and not only wounded veterans, but generally veterans. I know that there are so many initiatives. There are initiatives where you can, for example, grow veggies, care for like a garden, grow plants. There are different initiatives where you can draw things or communicate with like animals, dolphins, dogs. So there are so many of them. I don't really know how many of them are state funded, but there's also a lot of different initiatives and projects that support wounded veterans. In Irpin, for example, not far from HOSTOMEL, that's where my base was. There was this very, very good center for wounded Ukrainian veterans where people received rehabilitation. For example, they lost limbs or they were wounded. My friend Vova Tovkis, who was wounded, he sustained a brain damage from a bullet, and he was paralyzed, and they literally revived him. So there are initiatives, and in Ukraine, we surprisingly we understand the necessity to care for people, for military, for active military, and for the veterans as well, because we realize that after the war, in the end, everybody in Ukraine, including civilians, will need help. I think, I think that experience from such countries like Bosnia, for example, or Croatia will be helpful for Ukraine, because Bosnia, Croatia, those people survived a similar period. They survived similar war like we do. So it was an atrocious war, and atrocities were committed against civilians big time, just like in Ukraine. So I think their experience is very, very close to Ukrainian experience. I think there's a lot of things that we can share. Has your brother made progress with the development of drones? He did. He does. So Roman is there in the chat right now. You can see him over there. And I think you can, by the way, directly ask him questions, and he will reply. Hello, Claire. Claire in the chat. Can you please ask your friend Ben Hodges if the US military would follow instruction if ordered to invade a friendly country? That's a really good question, by the way. Unfortunately, General Ben Hodges is not my friend. Wish he was, but my level is like this, and he's like a general. But the question itself is really, really interesting. As a military, I would not even answer this question myself. I would struggle answering it, because what makes army an army, and like the difference between army and any other civilian organization, is that in the civilian organization you have this possibility to discuss, is it wrong or right or whatever. In the army, you have chain of command and you have to follow orders. You don't have to follow orders that are illegal when your commander orders you to commit crimes. You don't have to do that, of course. But whether to invade or not invade other countries, from legal standpoint, hard to say, really. That's the reason why we always need civilian control over the army, I believe. That is the reason why society and the army must be inseparable, I think. Both like psychologically and technically. So it's a really good question, Claire, actually. When I volunteered in Ukraine last summer, I noticed lots of steps, but few escalators or lifts. You are completely right, my friend. I really, really hope that this will improve, because this is actually something typical for Ukraine. In Ukraine, you could rarely see somebody, for example, in a wheelchair, for the reason that people in the wheelchairs, they would prefer spending time home, because Ukraine, even though we have developed infrastructure, but it's not developed enough for people with disabilities, unfortunately. I saw that a lot in Ukraine. I admit I saw that a lot in Ukraine. It's really hard to, for example, for people, not only people with disabilities, but generally, if you're a mom with a baby trolley, right? Uh, really hard to get from point A to point B. So that is a problem that we have. Are you optimistic that the stolen children will be returned to Ukraine? I think that there is a chance, because why not? Look, let's talk about motivation just a bit. All right? So there is this mindset, kind of mindset, all right? Like, if we win, we do this and this, but if we lose, we do this and this. And that is why there's usually two answers to any question, right? Depending on the situation. The kids can be either returned to Ukraine or not. In case Russia loses the war, they will be returned. In case Russia doesn't lose the war, those kids will remain in Russia. I sincerely believe that this is a wrong approach, because we should always do 100% of what we can in order to make sure that we win this war and Russia loses and kids will be returned. If we even consider for a second that there is a possibility that those kids will not be returned, that Russia wins the war, that Ukrainian identity disappears, Ukrainian sovereignty is destroyed, then this is exactly what happens. If we don't accept the fact that we can lose, if we don't accept the fact that Russia will survive, Russia doesn't collapse, Russia becomes stronger, Russia wins the war, if we refuse deep inside of us to accept this fact, to accept that this is even possible, then we will win. And we will see them, because they are also very dedicated, but we will see them crushed, right? So this is the proper mindset that we should have, I think. That is why I am optimistic. I believe that the kids will be returned to Ukraine, and I believe that we will see a lot of successful and absolutely emotional stories of those kids reunited with their relatives, not with their parents, unfortunately, because a lot of them were eliminated by Russian terrorists, but at least with their like grandmas, grandpas, and cousins, and we will see that in the future. So we should be always dedicated 100% to our cause. That's just my opinion, okay? I like Hodges, except that he's consumed by hate for Trump. Yeah, he was best buds with John McCain. John McCain has my respect. He was a great person. A lot of Ukrainians respect John McCain. But as for Trump, What can I say, my dear friends? What can I say? I literally expect, some kind of story emerge. Actually, there was a story already. There was a story about J.D. Vance whose daughter was scared by people screaming "Slava Ukraini," and I hope she wasn't traumatized by that, of course. And what Russians did, Russians made like a small piece of that video. I'm not sure if it was like edited or something, but it shows someone allegedly spitting in this kid's trolley, right? Basically picturing Ukrainians like this evil herd of Nazi whatever. And J.D. Vance, they're heroically standing, defending his family and his sofa. So there are already stories like that, but I personally, we already heard stories about Ukrainian president being a dictator. We already heard stories about imaginary 5,000 Ukrainians surrounded in Kursk Oblast. And by the way, let me know what happened to them, because after Trump mentioned that, I don't remember any development of this story. I really, really want to know what happened to those 5,000 men. Are they fine? They're under the siege, in the Kursk Oblast. Like, is everything okay with them? I would really like to know. But I really expect to hear stories like Ukrainians are eating your dogs and cats, your pets. Uh, Hungry, evil Ukrainians, roaming your neighborhood, and you cannot tell if they're dangerous, because you cannot tell if they're like Ukrainians or Americans. Like, he can be from like Florida, for example. They look the same, and they roam your neighborhood, and they like snatch your pets, and eat them. So I'm expecting such stories to emerge, actually. Vance is pretty hot in drag. You're blind and hammered. Oh my god. Um, Generally, there was a case when people started massively unsubscribing from my channel, like during elections, when I started responding to what Trump says about Ukraine and his team. And generally, when J.D. Vance, for example, says, wait a minute, Kanti, my friend, are you here? Kanti, are you? Yeah, Kanti. Oh my God, you're in the chat. Nice to see you, my friend. Uh, we're like visiting our streams in turns. So what I wanted to say is that when you hear like J.D. Vance speaking about Bucha being a propaganda tour for foreigners, you know, which, by the way, still triggers me. I wish J.D. Vance good health, and I wish him not meet me in real life after that, because I brought a lot of journalists to the open mass grave and they saw people there. Some of them were kids. Some of them were kids the age of J.D. Vance's kid, by the way. So when J.D. Vance says that horrible crap, when you hear the representatives from the Trump administration saying basically Russian bullshit about Ukraine, that is literally what they think. That is not because they play 10D chess. That is literally what they think. And since they don't have absolutely zero respect to Ukraine, question is, why should I have it? I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I respect people by default, but I can't stand I can't stand those morons. You know, people who have absolutely no respect by default. I don't like such people. In Ukraine, we call them zloby. And in Ukraine, we hate such people because they cause a lot of trouble generally. Hodges would be a greater force for the good of Ukraine if he would set aside his beef. My friend, he is extremely neutral regarding Trump. Okay, even in my interview with him, General Hodges is extremely neutral and objective. Because I asked several questions trying to like find his opinion, right? For example, the challenges faced by the NATO members in terms of the US-NATO relations. And the answer was absolutely not what I expected, but still very insightful. But in my opinion, General Hodges is very much neutral and objective. Ignorance, hypocrisy, and stupidity is the DNA of manga. The problem is that, not like problem or not, the fact is that they made this community, right? Basically being like stupid, ignorant, and disrespectful turned into a culture. This is something that, you know, unites those people. When people are united due to like hate, when people united around hatred, right? It's a very strong union, generally speaking, but it's not constructive. I don't know. I feel natural this pies or distraction to such people. It's just something natural. It's like I really don't like people who cannot have civilized discussion. It's hard to answer, seriously. What is Shlobery? Жлобы, how to explain this? So we have a word that sounds like жлоб, and жлоб is generally like a greedy degenerate. That is the closest explanation, that like the closest description that I can give you. Like greedy degenerate, somebody riding a huge car and having absolutely no respect to anybody else. Like when you look at Russian tourists, right, coming to like Egypt or like Turkey on their huge, extremely expensive cars and SUVs, when you see how they behave, like the way they talk, the way they like despise everybody, that is zlob. That is what in Ukraine we call zlob. And in Ukraine, we hate those people because unfortunately Russian culture brought this subculture of zlobism, this element, to Ukrainian culture, and unfortunately we had that for quite a while. When you cut the line, for example, right, there's queue and you just push everybody aside and you want to go first because this is you know, everybody should recognize your authority. That is zlobism. That is what in Ukraine we hate so much. When you see zlob in Ukraine, that is basically like a disappearing species, right, in Ukraine at this point. But we are closely acquainted with such people. I'm not sure how you call them in your like in your culture. In Ukraine, that is zloby, that is zlobism, that is zlobs, and Trump's team is a great example of zlobism. Now I understand. Now I understand like what's like my internal problem with this, because this is exactly how they look like. That's the answer, apparently. Trump is a shitter. They kinda, yeah, they kinda have something in common, but I gotta understand what. Because I have those vibes of Yanukovych. When I look at Trump, I have those vibes, but I still gotta recognize, you know, what's the foundation, what's the basis of this. To avoid undue influence on lower ranks, officers do not take sides on politics in public. Yeah, my friend, that's the case, and that is right. Like, remember when I served, I would definitely never talk about politics, like what happens in the United States. I would say that I agree with both sides and yada yada. You guys know what to do better, which I still think, because you know, when Claire, it's I will just text in the chat. Жлоб. Yeah, it's in the chat now. Yeah, even now, you know, when you guys ask me like what do I think about like situation in the United States. Hard to say because I'm not an American. I don't know 99% of what's going on in the United States. Like, I don't understand, right? But that's the case. Generally, if you're a military, you don't talk about politics. That's a bad manner, right? That's a bad tone to talk about politics if you're wearing a uniform. In German, it's Snob or Potz. Not like I would not say that it's snob. Snob is like, you know, like blue blood. No, it's not. It's not the case. Žlob is basically like a dude who doesn't respect anybody, and he has absolutely no manners, no respect. But he has or she has like a lot of greed and a lot of, you know, like show off. I love this word. Yeah, I didn't use this word for a while, by the way, and frankly speaking, you know, I start to forget Ukrainian. That sucks. Um, it's good that I always have like Mirko to talk to. So, okay, my dear friends, I will not be keeping you any longer. Thank you so much for staying with me tonight. 2:42 a.m. Oh my god. I'll go get myself some coffee and I will try to have some sleep, even though it's probably impossible already. But thank you so much for staying with me. Thank you so much to our moderators, our viewers. Thank you so much to all the members of this channel who keep this channel running. And we will see you later. My dear friends, be safe.